They were involved with someone else. Not because you were not enough, not because you were easy to walk away from, but because something inside them was not ready to face what was genuine and real. And now they carry something they can no longer push aside or keep buried. What they need to say is not simple, and it is not comfortable, because even while they were physically somewhere else, emotionally a piece of them never fully left. And that truth has now become something they can no longer pretend does not exist. Have you ever felt like a connection never truly ended, even when everything around you suggested it had? Something stayed unfinished. Something remained quietly alive in the background of your thoughts long after it was supposed to be over. That is exactly where they have been living, not stuck in the past, but in a space where truth was delayed rather than destroyed. Because a connection that is real does not simply vanish. It waits, it stays present, and eventually it demands to be looked at honestly and without confusion. If you want the full truth about why they came back carrying this urgent message after being with someone else, hit like right now and stay with this completely. They chose what felt secure instead of what felt true. They moved toward what was familiar, rather than what was calling to them quietly from somewhere much deeper. They held on to what was easier to manage instead of what could have changed them in a way that lasted. And by doing that, they convinced themselves that comfort and peace were the same thing. Even as something inside them kept questioning that decision, they stayed where feelings did not ask too much of them. They stayed where things were predictable and where they could remain in control without much effort at all. But underneath all of that, there was always a quiet awareness that something more significant had been left behind. Something that required more courage than they had available at that point in their life. And once that awareness began to settle, it did not soften with time. It stayed. It appeared during quiet evenings. It rose up in the pauses between conversations. It surfaced in the moments when everything around them went still, and their own thoughts became louder than anything else. The feeling never demanded attention, but it refused to leave. It remained calm and steady, and it kept reminding them that something unresolved was still waiting somewhere inside. No matter how far forward they tried to move, this awareness stayed just beneath the surface, quietly shaping everything they felt about the life they were living. In the silence between conversations, and in the slow repetition of days that began blending into one another, they started noticing how little life was truly asking of them. Everything felt manageable, but somehow restricted, as though real growth had been traded away for routine and predictability. They began to see how much of who they actually were had been kept hidden just to make things easier to control. They avoided deeper questions. They avoided stronger emotions. They avoided anything that might challenge who they were beneath the surface of the version they showed to the world. Over time, this created a quiet distance within themselves, a feeling of being present in their own life, but not truly participating in it. And that distance slowly became impossible to overlook or explain away. What they shared with the other person may have appeared stable, but it never carried the same depth or emotional weight. What they had with you was something different entirely. It reached further inside them, and it stayed longer within their heart than anything else they encountered. And things that carry genuine meaning do not disappear simply because someone walks away for a period of time. They remain quietly in the background, waiting without pressure to finally be acknowledged. At some point they stopped pretending, not through a sudden dramatic moment, and not through one clear revelation, but slowly and honestly, in a way that felt both uncomfortable and undeniable. They admitted to themselves that they were never fully alive in the place they had chosen to stay. Something meaningful had always been absent, even when they tried hard not to see it. They realized that no matter how much they had tried to convince themselves they had moved on, a part of them had always remained emotionally unfinished with you. This understanding did not arrive easily. It came through a quiet kind of honesty that forced them to look at their own choices without running from what they found. Comment still here if you have ever felt that a connection never truly ended, even while they were choosing someone else. They came to understand that they never gave that connection a real and fair chance, not because it lacked meaning, but because it required a level of courage and openness they were simply not ready for at that time. The kind of courage that asks someone to show up without their defenses in place, to sit with the possibility of rejection, to feel something deeply without knowing where it would lead. That kind of openness meant risking pain. It meant risking becoming someone different because of what they allowed themselves to feel. And instead of stepping into that space, they stepped away from it and chose safety over growth. Now that awareness carries something it could not express before, it is not polished or carefully put together. It is not asking for sympathy from anyone. It simply exists as a quiet and steady truth within them that can no longer be pushed aside or ignored. They now see what you represented in their life from a completely different place of understanding. They recognize that what they were truly avoiding was never you. It was the parts of themselves they were not yet ready to face or accept. And that recognition changes something deep inside them. It shifts how they view their past and the choices they made within it. It is not a loud or dramatic transformation, but it is a lasting one. Because once a person clearly sees their own pattern of avoidance, they cannot go back to pretending it was never there. They cannot return to the comfortable version of the story they once told themselves. Whether they decide to reach out or remain silent, something within them has already shifted permanently. The life they were living inside an illusion has come apart, and that collapse brings both discomfort and a clarity that cannot be undone. There is no simple way out of it once it becomes fully visible to them. Type yes. If you want me to reveal the real reason they could never fully leave you emotionally, even while they were with someone else, what you need to hold on to above everything else is this. None of what happened was ever a reflection of your worth. None of it was ever a measure of your value as a person. It was always and only a reflection of their emotional readiness and their capacity to face what they genuinely felt at that moment in their life. You were not replaced by someone better, not in any way at all. You simply crossed paths with someone who did not yet have the ability to meet you where you were standing. And now they live inside the consequences of their own choices, carrying the weight of everything they postponed, avoided, and left without resolution. Whether they speak about it openly or not, that is the truth they live with every single day. Not a dramatic return, and not an immediate confession, but a truth settling deeper into their awareness with every passing moment. The more they reflect, the more they understand that what they once mistook for certainty was often just fear wearing a different face. They confused emotional distance with strength. They confused control with stability. They confused familiarity with genuine fulfillment. And only later did they begin to understand the real difference between those things. Because real connection has a way of staying present, even when someone tries to move past it. It lingers inside memories. It appears in unexpected moments throughout the day. It rises through quiet comparisons they never intended to make. And over time, those subtle reminders become impossible to dismiss or explain away. There were moments when they tried convincing themselves the chapter had completely closed. Moments when they believed enough time had passed to erase what they once felt. But each attempt brought them back to the same understanding. Some experiences leave a mark that time alone cannot remove. Not because they are perfect, but because they carry genuine meaning. And meaning has a way of staying long after the circumstances surrounding it have completely changed. As their awareness continued to grow, they began recognizing patterns within themselves they had never honestly looked at before. Patterns of avoidance, patterns of hesitation, patterns of reaching for what felt safe instead of what felt true. At first, this recognition was deeply uncomfortable, but eventually it became something they could no longer turn away from. They saw how many of their decisions had been shaped by fear rather than by anything authentic. And once that understanding arrived, it changed how they viewed everything that came before. They started questioning the real reasons behind their choices. They started asking themselves whether they had truly followed what they felt, or simply followed what felt easier to manage. And those questions brought them back to thoughts of you far more often than they expected. Not because they were trapped inside the past, but because the past still held lessons they had not yet fully absorbed or understood. The connection remained significant because it represented something that went deeper than attraction or timing alone. It represented possibility. It represented growth. It represented a version of themselves they were not yet prepared to step into. And that is exactly why it continued to stay with them. Not as something heavy, but as a truth that was still waiting to be fully acknowledged. The more honest they became with themselves, the harder it became to deny what they genuinely felt. And with every passing day, the space between avoidance and acceptance became smaller and smaller. What once felt confusing began making sense. What once felt overwhelming slowly became clear. And what once felt easier to ignore became the one thing that could no longer be overlooked. Share this with someone who is still waiting for clarity from a person who chose safety instead of truth. That is why this realization carries so much weight. Because it is not only about regret, it is about understanding something that could not be seen before. It is about finally recognizing what was always present beneath the surface of everything. It is about seeing that some connections arrive in a person's life to teach lessons that cannot be learned through any other experience. And whether they choose to act on what they feel, or simply carry the awareness quietly within them, the truth stays unchanged. Something meaningful existed between you, something real left an impact, and something important continued living inside their heart long after they believed they had fully walked away. That awareness has now become part of their story, a quiet reminder that the things people avoid most often reveal the most about who they truly are, a reminder that growth rarely happens inside the walls of comfort, and a reminder that what is genuine does not disappear simply because it was delayed or overlooked. It waits, it remains present, and eventually it asks to be seen for exactly what it is, without pretending to be anything less. You are real, and genuine connections leave an imprint that cannot be erased by convenience, distraction, or avoidance of any kind. They want you to understand that their choices were never about your worth but about their own fears and their level of emotional readiness at that time. The hesitation, the inconsistency, and the distance all came from fear, not from a lack of understanding of what you truly meant to them. And now that fear has been faced, it has left them more aware, more honest, and more conscious of the consequences of how they handled something that genuinely mattered to them. They now carry a clarity that feels heavy and undeniable, and impossible to soften with excuses or explanations. Within that clarity they can see what they overlooked, what they postponed, and what can no longer be changed or undone. They see the impact of their silence and inconsistency on someone who deserved full presence and honest effort. This awareness does not arrive with comfort. It settles within them quietly, and it does not rush through their thoughts or disappear quickly. It rests inside them as a steady reminder of every time they chose distance over honesty and hesitation over truth. Comment real if this message touched something deep inside you and brought up emotions you thought had long gone quiet. This is not a request for things to return to the way they once were. It is not asking for reconciliation or another chance right now. It is simply an honest admission that only arrives after genuine reflection and real personal growth. They recognize the courage it took for you to remain emotionally open, to ask for honesty, to refuse to settle for half-hearted effort or unclear intentions. And within that recognition there is both respect and regret existing at the same time. Respect for the strength you carried. Regret for not being brave enough to meet you at that same level when the moment was still available. That regret is not dramatic or visible to the outside world. It is quiet and internal, and consistently present beneath the surface of their daily thoughts. It appears during late-night moments when distractions have finally gone quiet. It surfaces through memories they try but cannot fully push away. It reminds them of the honesty they avoided, and the connection they did not protect when they still had the chance. This feeling does not shout for attention, but it never fully leaves either. It stays with them, shaping how they now understand their past and the choices they made during that chapter of their life. What they want you to understand most clearly is that this goes much deeper than missing comfort or something familiar. It is about finally understanding what a real connection actually feels like, and recognizing that something authentic cannot simply be replaced or ignored, no matter how hard someone tries. In every decision they made, there was still a part of them quietly aware of you, aware of the truth they were not yet saying out loud. That awareness never faded. It only grew stronger over time, and gradually became a clarity they can no longer push aside or explain away. They are not asking for forgiveness. They are not trying to force anything from you. They are simply offering the truth of what they now understand, something they were not able to express before reaching this point. This is their truth, presented honestly and without performance or unnecessary drama. It comes from someone who finally sees what stood before them all along, and now carries that understanding with full responsibility and without excuses. There is no attempt to rewrite what happened or make the past look different than it truly was. There is only the effort to acknowledge what was real and what it genuinely meant deep inside them. They are no longer avoiding the emotions they once spent so much effort trying to escape. They are no longer hiding behind silence or distraction the way they once did. They have faced their hesitation, their emotional distance, and their fear of being truly vulnerable with another person. And through that process they have come to understand something clear and lasting. The person they were not prepared to fully show up for was always you. That truth now carries an emotional weight that does not lift easily. It has reshaped how they understand connection, honesty, and what it means to be genuinely present for another person. They are different now in their awareness, even if the past remains unchanged. Even if they never act on what they feel, the understanding they carry will stay. It remains because they now see you clearly, not as a choice among many, not as something replaceable, but as a meaningful connection they were simply not ready for when it first arrived. That truth stays with them. It follows them into every new experience. And whenever real emotional depth appears again, what comes next is no longer confusion or avoidance. It becomes about conscious and deliberate choice, your clarity, your ability to stay grounded in your own truth and self-respect without wavering. Moving forward, take a moment and sit fully with this. Allow yourself to feel the weight of what has passed and what may still exist ahead on your path. Trust your instincts. Trust the voice inside you that has guided you through everything up until now. Trust the strength you have built through your own experiences over time. You already know what feels right for you. You already understand what you deserve. And now, with full awareness of both their growth and your own, the next step forward can be taken with clarity, calmness, genuine confidence, and steady self-respect that belongs entirely to you. On the surface, someone may appear fully committed elsewhere, or entirely focused in another direction. But emotionally, a part of them can still remain connected to something they never fully understood or resolved within themselves. This is not simply about betrayal or confusion. It is about the deeper and more layered nature of human attachment, fear, and personal growth that unfolds gradually, and not always on a schedule we expect or control. What makes this so significant is the role that fear plays in shaping decisions that people often do not fully understand while they are making them. Fear quietly steers choices far more than most people are willing to acknowledge. Fear of emotional closeness, fear of vulnerability, fear of losing control, fear of confronting what they genuinely feel inside. All of these can lead someone toward other connections not out of genuine love but out of comfort, distraction, or the need to avoid something deeper altogether. And yet the person they shared a profound connection with remains present in their thoughts, even when they never speak about it. That presence continues through memories, quiet comparisons, and unspoken reflections that stay with them. It shapes their emotional reality in ways that are not always visible from the outside, but are deeply and consistently felt within. Regret becomes a necessary part of this entire process. Whenever someone avoids emotional truth or delays a meaningful connection, they eventually begin to feel the full weight of that avoidance. This understanding often arrives quietly during periods of stillness, or in moments when there are no distractions left to shield them from their own internal world. And when that moment finally comes, they are left standing face to face with everything they once tried to avoid, everything they postponed, everything they now understand with a depth that simply did not exist before. That understanding becomes impossible to dismiss. It stays as a lasting reminder of what was real, what mattered, and what left a permanent mark that no amount of time or distraction could fully erase. It is not simply about missing someone at the surface level. It is about finally seeing the choices that were made, the fear that shaped those choices, and the missed opportunity to fully appreciate a genuine emotional connection that once existed and still left its mark long after it ended. That understanding does not arrive all at once or without effort. It develops slowly, becoming stronger with every honest moment they allow themselves to sit inside without running. And once it is fully recognized, it stays with them. It shapes how they move forward and how they define what truly matters from that point on. This kind of understanding is powerful because it brings a person face to face with accountability, genuine humility, and inner growth that does not easily disappear. It does not offer an easy escape or a quick way out. Instead, it asks them to look directly at their own decisions and the effects those decisions had on the life of another person. At the same time, growth is never limited to just one side of a connection. While one person is learning to confront fear and accept responsibility, the other is also changing and developing in their own way, learning to build stronger boundaries, learning to value their own peace more deeply than before, learning to place their self-respect above the need for answers or validation from someone else. This creates a situation where both people continue to grow even at different speeds, and often without knowing what the other person is experiencing. When clarity finally arrives for one, the other may have already developed a much deeper sense of strength and emotional understanding through their own separate journey. This shift matters because it ensures that any future interaction, should it ever occur, is no longer rooted in confusion or emotional dependency. It becomes grounded in conscious awareness and genuine maturity. The dynamic between them changes because neither person is standing in the same place they once occupied. And that difference changes everything about what any future connection could mean or become.